Off. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's session. I'm very excited about it. Obviously, what we wanted to do with the session is everybody's talking about AI. The conversation is not whether it's going to change advertising and communications, but how quickly it already is. So today's session with ZenRobot is designed to help move beyond the theory and the hype. I know all of you are probably working with a multitude of tools already, but to look at what AI actually means for agencies in the real world, from strategy and ideation to production workflows, new operating models, etc. So we are delighted to have the team from ZenRobot with us today, David Moffat and Ross Simmons. And you'll hear more about ZenRobot shortly, but because they work at the intersection of creativity, technology, AI-enabled production, and because they really are experts in this field and have been for some time, David and Ross are going to be sharing some practical examples. They're going to be showing us some demos and just giving us a bit of theory, but also a bit of practical knowledge. And I think the great thing about all of that is to enable a feeling of confidence, but also a feeling of what's possible. We're also very excited that we've got a partnership with ZenRobot for ACA members. So you'll hear all about that. But they do offer training boot camps and other ways to help you. So we're excited. Thank you, Ross. Thank you, David. And I'm going to hand over to you on that note.
Cool. Thank you very much, Gillian. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. There's a lot to get through in this short session. So as Gillian said, there will be a combination of theory, but we are also going to be getting to some demonstrations later in the presentation. So the session is really, as the title suggests, the AI-powered agency, rewiring the agency from insight to output. It's really about how AI is reshaping the way agencies work, from the earliest research right through to creative production and all the way to kind of ongoing optimization, reporting, analysis, etc. Choosing a pathway through this conversation is not easy. It's really a challenge because how AI gets adopted differs from agency to agency. It really differs whether you're a small independent agency or if you're large and part of a holding company. It really looks different whether you're a full service or a specialist agency or operating within media. And then, of course, fluency differs enormously within most organizations. So apologies upfront if some of what we cover is already well understood by you. There are going to be people in the room for whom the basics still need to land. But the key takeaway is the following. The AI-powered agency is the agency that refactors its core workflows around AI models, agents, and data. It's not the agency that has bought or even created the most tools. So this is how we're going to move through the presentation. Firstly, I'm going to just establish some fluency around the core technologies driving the changes. And this is just so that we're all working off the same map. From there, we're going to look at a framework for the AI-powered agency itself. And we've looked at the role of AI across the key divisions that exist within most agencies, including operations. We're then going to just expose you to a maturity model to give you a sense for where your agency or where you as an individual may reside, and so that you've got a bit of a sense for what your next move might be. And then, as mentioned, we're going to touch on some practical examples. We have pre-recorded some videos so that there's no sort of live tool glitches that get in the way of the presentation flow. But Ross will then also do a demonstration building out some creative using a multimodal tool. And that's a term that we're going to be exposing you to in a moment as well. But very briefly, we are ZenRobot, as Gillian said. Thank you very much to the ACA for inviting us to do this today. So we exist to teach AI in a way that's accessible, practical, and genuinely useful to our clients and partners. And we do this through online courses and in-person workshops. We help a diverse range of businesses, creators, brands, filmmakers, gamers, agencies, marketers, and it's really just about building confidence with the tools that are shaping marketing workflows or storytelling or content production going into the future. Our approach is super simple. We focus on the principles behind the tools. The tools are changing all the time. It's estimated that the capabilities are doubling every 6 to 12 months. So we teach the principles that can be applied across tools, different platforms in ways that suit your businesses and your creative workflows. Very briefly, I'm David Moffat, so I'm the CEO at ZenRobot. I'm going to be leading the presentation through all of the theoretical slides, and then I will be handing over to Ross. My background is primarily in advertising and digital marketing. I led an agency called Hello Computer for 12 years, and I've had a career in Marcom spanning over 20. I've also been involved in an education company for about 6 years, and in various content production startups. Ross is one of South Africa's foremost Gen AI thought leaders. He was previously a web developer once upon a time at Hello Computer, and then left the industry to pursue his interest in origami as an artist and an animator before being an early adopter of AI half a decade ago. And we're a team of 10 in total, mostly based in South Africa, but we do have 2 staff members operating from Europe as well. Here is
AI is moving fast, powerful, exciting, and often a little overwhelming. That's where we come in. ZenRobot demystifies generative AI. Through masterclasses, our Gen AI Academy, and hands-on AI transformation training, we turn curiosity into confidence. From global brands to in-house teams, we redesign workflows to run on AI. We teach the principles so you can apply them. And we don't just teach AI, we use it. From stills to video to audio, for clients around the world, helping teams unlock new ways to think, create, and collaborate. Led by David Moffat and Ross Simmons, ZenRobot is built on careers spanning marketing, advertising, education, web development, and, of course, AI. AI doesn't have to be complicated, just guided. ZenRobot. Make AI make sense.
Okay, so let's jump into some basic fluency. So these are some of the models you need to know. Most, I'm sure you would already have heard of. So the first grouping is what we would call the frontier models. These are the large general purpose models. They're trained by a handful of major labs, OpenAI with the ChatGPT family, Anthropic with Claude, Google DeepMind with Gemini, Meta, Llama, XAI with their Grok, and so forth. So these are your large general purpose models. We then have specialist models. These are typically tools that are best in class for one modality. And there are some rock stars amongst them. So you would have no doubt heard of Midjourney, Nano Banana, probably increasingly Seedance. But there really are many of these. The list goes on. And this is for, production across audio, across visual generation and video, animation, motion, etc. The large language models, these are known as LLMs. So these are the systems probably most of us have our initial engagements with AI through LLMs. These are the systems that are trained to predict and generate language. In practice, they can help agencies think through text-heavy work such as research synthesis, strategic exploration, copywriting, briefing, reporting, etc. Very powerful tools to have in your suite. Diffusion models. So these are typically proficient with images and video. They learn patterns from huge data sets and reconstructing visuals from prompts, from references, and from controls. Examples would include the specialist models previously mentioned, like Midjourney. Now, what we are seeing as well is that the world of LLMs and the world of diffusion models, they are coming closer together, but the origination of these different models comes from quite different places. And so for creatives in the room, they might have observed that how you engage and prompt with an LLM, such as a ChatGPT, would be quite different from how you achieve results with a diffusion model such as Midjourney, because it hasn't been built on language, it's been built on deconstructing and reconstructing images. But we are seeing that starting to change. We also are now seeing multimodal tools. Multimodal basically means it can work across different types of media. So you may have heard of tools like Weavy or Flora, and they integrate and manage to work across text, images, video, audio, often combining different AI models, such as LLMs and diffusion models, into a single interface for seamless creative production. And then you would have heard of agentic AI. It's really not as complicated as many people think. I want you to just think about agentic AI as goal-orientated automation. It's really just a system that can pursue a goal across multiple steps. It's often an LLM at its core, and it's given a goal, and in order to achieve that goal, it concludes multiple steps using tools, memory, decision logic. It may have access to third-party tools such as your data in order to complete a task, and it can do that autonomously, so with a lot less direct prompting. Okay, guys, so yeah, it's a rapidly evolving landscape. There are revelations every other week. Over the next 12 to 18 months, what you can expect is that video models are going to mature even further, from short form to broadcast quality and long form coherent video, which is huge for this industry and for content creators in general. Voice agents are going to become indistinguishable from humans for short interactions, with implications for customer service, chatbots, lots of very interesting applications around voice. Multi-step agents are predicted to be able to fully run end-to-end campaigns, although depending on where you read, there are skeptics out there. I believe Gartner is assessed that as much as 40% of those campaigns will show signs of failure. So human in the loop will remain critical, but agentic multi-step processes for campaigns, we're going to see big leaps over the next 12 to 18 months. The hours billed model starts to phase out. So outcome-based and hybrid pricing, we expect to start to become the new default in certain markets. We know that the talent pyramid will reshape, and there's a lot of anxiety around that. So if there's time, we can touch on some of the changes there. But as you know, we are expecting junior production roles to compress. However, a whole lot of new roles will be emerging as well. Brand safety and guardrails tech matures, so we know that this is a major area of concern and a lot of investment going into it. And then finally, IP and training data law is going to start to settle. So there are some major cases taking place around the world. For example, the New York Times against OpenAI. So a summary judgment is predicted within the next 12 months. And that could have ramifications for how copyright and IP is treated. And that will give agencies also a lot of comfort around what they can use commercially on behalf of their clients. So those are just some of the bigger shifts that one can expect over the foreseeable future. Okay, so let's look at the AI-powered agency. The framework we've used here is the 6 layers that are built around the primary divisions that underpin a full-service agency. Naturally, there's specialist agencies that can reside within any of these layers. And we've allocated a layer to operations as well. Now, what I would like you to think about as we go through these various sections is that it's not the tools that matter. Depending on whether you are part of a holding company, you may be obliged to use particular tools. If you're a small and independent agency, there may be financial constraints around licensing. Whatever tools you use, ultimately, the transformation of your agency resides in the degree to which you embrace adapting your workflows to embrace AI for efficiencies and delivering deeper value to your clients through those tools. So it's refactoring your workflows across the 6 layers is what I would like you to think about as we go through these various layers. So, yeah, to unlock the value through models and agents and data is the promise for deeper research, sharper insights, clearer briefs, leaner pitches, and more thorough reports. But at the same time, I do want to state that we are not blindly evangelical about these tools. Nor are we pessimistic doomers around the prospects of AI. We called ourselves ZenRobot because we, as optimists, are choosing to use these tools in a positive way, and we hope that they have largely positive implications for the future of marketing, creative production, branding, etc. So we are very much pro-human, and as we go through these layers within the business, we're going to be pointing out what the benefits of AI is for this particular division and one workflow that could play a role. Now, bear in mind, within different layers of your businesses, there are multiple workflows. And I just think even in how I use LLMs within my own, day-to-day work, it's summary reports of categories so that I'm informed when I have conversations with my clients. That's one workflow. I have another workflow, which is to, sharpen my proposals based on constructs that I've previously created, or tonality, which is mine, that I've authored and built GPTs around. So there are many workflows associated with each of these layers, and they're not particularly sexy to go through. That's the other thing, the point I wanted to make, that the production that you see, the creative production, and a lot that you see on social media, and all of the exciting possibilities, is like 10%. The real transformation sits in the unsexy layers. It's crunching data, it's producing reports, it's doing category scans, it's all of that. But really, that's where the ROI is, and that's where the hours can be saved. So let's get into it. The first layer that we're going to look at is insights and strategy. So the benefits of an AI augmented process, the left column, I'm going to touch on benefits first, and then a proposed workflow, something that you can take and do after this presentation. We will share the deck, so please don't try and scribble all of this down. And then we'll identify relevant tools. And many of these tools do much of the same things. So, if you're partial towards Gemini, or you love Claude, or perhaps you prevented from using ChatGPT, many of these workflows can be attained across different tools. So don't worry too much about kind of what is in there. Okay, so the benefits of an AI augmented process in insights and strategy. LLMs can synthesize vast amounts of research. They can build personas for you. They can scan culture. They can draft positionings. Agents can run weekly competitive intelligence on autopilot. They really are a huge advantage to go deeper on the subject matter in which you need to be an authority on behalf of your clients. Whether you're in the strategy department or not, I really would encourage particularly account managers to be making use of LLMs to get really deeper into the categories in which they're operating on behalf of their clients. Now, a strategy development workflow, we actually do have a video example later in the presentation as well. But in this instance, what I would encourage you to do is to build a custom GPT expressly for strategy. So you would define the system instructions. And to do that, if you haven't done that before, go to GPT and say, I'm building a strategy custom GPT. Guide me on the questions to answer to develop the instructions for this system. It will prompt you and you'll respond back to it. Basically, you giving it a job description for, a senior strategy director. You then would input into it all of the information that's going to enrich it and give it guidance for its response to you. These are called your inputs. You can put in briefs, white papers, relevant data, competitor links, audience research, social media comments. Instructed to analyze all of that and generate category intelligence for you. It can look for audience tensions. It can do a competitor claim map on behalf of you. You then request it to assist you with some positioning territories. It will develop personas and insight territories and draft positioning and messaging frameworks. And this is where the human in the loop is so important. It's not giving you the answers. It's giving you information for you that is synthesized from vast, very broad amount of data and information so that you're in a position to apply your judicious insight and select what is most relevant given your understanding of the client's category, the brand, etc. And then finally, once you have made your selections, you can instruct your very same tool to produce slide-ready strategic documentation. In the second layer, we've got our strategy. We're now in a position to start ideating off the back of it. So the benefit of bringing in an AI augmented process here is that going from a brief to a concept loop, or developing a strategy as we just have now to exploring some conceptual territories, can collapse from days to hours. Now, we, as stated, are very pro-human. If there's any creatives in the room, we're certainly not suggesting that the big idea now is going to come from an LLM, but it is a very valuable resource to explore particular territories and run in parallel to your brainstorm with your team, or to do, split your teams. Some work with LLMs, others don't, and see what comes through. You might just be surprised that it puts you into a direction that you hadn't considered. Now, once again, we're suggesting here creating a custom GPT for ideation and copywriting. Custom GPT is interchangeable with a lot of the other LLMs here. They've got different names, but you can build these in all of the major LLMs. When you're creating a custom GPT for ideation, you can literally instruct the system to go and look at the award-winning work, from particular award shows and determine what made it original, etc. You really can make the system do a hell of a lot of work, encourage it to surprise by combining ideas in unexpected ways, etc. If you're getting bland work, or suggestions out of your GPT, I would say go back to the instructions and push it further. Once you've built it, you again put inputs in. These could be the strategic outputs that we've already created, which now contains our positioning, some insights, messaging frameworks, different territories. And you then ask your GPT to produce some big ideas, some hooks, some various territories. What's nice about using collaborating with a tool like this, once you've created it within your workflow, is that if you've got a great idea, whether it's LLM generated or from your team, expanding on that, iterating with it, modifying your idea to suit this myriad of creative touch points that we now have to deliver work against, short form for social media, the 30-second script, the 2-minute script. How does this play out as an activation? That's where, these tools really do help us move a lot faster. You can also use it to visualize mood boards, visual directions, and early storyboards that you can then, take to your creative directors, your ECDs, so that you're actually advancing the conversation quite swiftly. And again, iterations across for different audiences, iterations even for different languages. These are all possible with these tools. And again, you can validate your ideas, not just for strategic alignment, but also originality. Ask it I've got this idea. Has anything been done similar to this out there? What can you find? So there's a blend of relevant tools here to this particular workflow, all of the LLMs, and then we are seeing some of the specialist models come through here. So we've suggested Midjourney, Ideogram, Flux, Runway, Adobe Firefly, Crea, Pimento, and producing custom GPTs, of course. Now, production is a vast area. We do a lot of training within the production layer around content creation at ZenRobot. The benefits and the promise for this industry is, firstly, asset variation. So, what you might still do is a traditional shoot, but then, what you do with that content and how you roll it out for campaigns that are spanning digital out of home, online display, social, maybe connected TV, etc. There's very powerful tools for asset variation, localization as well, post-production, creating voice, creating motion in general, extending stills into video. There's really the possibilities are endless. And this is where a lot of Gen AI investment lives. So the workflow that we're suggesting today is creating a pitch video. Now, we know pitches are very expensive. And so this is one way in which one can reduce cost on pitches and, create a video and have a lot of autonomy around making changes to that. Your voiceover is no longer done at the cost of 20,000 Rand and, you can't edit it. All of this is iterative. And I want you to bear that in mind when I go through these workflows as well. They're just examples, but the way we work with Gen AI in general is that it is a cyclical and iterative process. It's not quite as chronological as what I'm suggesting here. So you might bounce around, like in step 1, choosing the appropriate diffusion models, depending on whether your creative vision is for photorealism or more illustrative in its art direction. But you have a world of models to choose from. You would then create your mood boards and visual directions. Your workflow would then be to prompt for the specific key visuals that you would require in your video. So this is building out the characters, building out the environments, attaining stylistic consistency across those so that you can move towards creating a video. Lay out your storyboard, your narrative flow, or your scene structure, and then utilize your key images which you might have made in, say, for example, Midjourney, which also offers motion now, which I'm sure the creatives in the room will know. But there are tools that are, like Luma, for example. There are tools that were designed. Their DNA is video. And so, we use our keyframes that we've created to roll out these video sequences. Most of those are like, shorter form, but as stated earlier in the presentation, we are now starting to see the promise of longer visual sequences. You would assemble all of those. You can create audio, you can create your music and your sound design using tools like Suno, your voiceovers, with things like Hey Gen or E11 Labs. And then you assemble it all together into your final outputs. You can do that very simply with tools such as CapCut. You don't really even need to be an expert using something like Premiere to edit a production video together. So there's a lot of possibilities within this layer, a lot of workflows that are different depending on whether you're creating images or whether you're creating video, audio, or music, voiceovers or music. And we will demo some of this live in action shortly. Okay, I'm going to move swiftly through the next couple. Media is not an area of deep specialization for ourselves. What I will say is that media has had the benefit of AI and machine learning embedded and core to its technologies for a very long time. It's been operating in the background around programmatic optimization, and kind of more recently around dynamic content optimization, etc. So there's a lot of AI related tech which is powering much of these businesses, and how your company engages with us will very much depend on, are you a specialist media agency, part of a global holding company that has invested in this tech? Looks very differently to the small agency that is creating its own agentic process, utilizing Claude Cowork to optimize, its meta campaigns. So choosing a pathway through this conversation is not necessarily an easy one. But what we do, and what I've put here quite simply as a workflow, is around media planning, in which we find it to be excellent. And again, whether you're using a custom GPT, or if you're developing this with Claude, it's really up to you. But you can input your campaign objectives, your budget, your audience, creative assets. If you have historical performance data, you can put that all into your custom solution, and instruct your GPT to analyze and identify high value audiences. Those can be simulated audiences, what the roles would be of different channels, based on your budget or past performance patterns, and it will generate a channel mix for you and a budget allocation and a full flighting strategy. If you don't have media experience, I think you'll find, you'll be astounded really at, how rich a plan a simple process like this can produce. It may not know all of the tactical opportunities. So if you are in the media industry specifically, the human in the loop will be essential, and you will probably observe some missed opportunities, and that's good. We have a role to play. But in this workflow, what I've suggested is just taking it to the point of planning. The media activation is a human-led behavior. It is possible to do this through agentic processes as well, but there has been quite a few reports of late around some ad accounts being banned based on the perception that these API calls are being driven by bots, because they obviously behave in a very similar way. So I think probably safest to do your planning and not try and custom create an agentic solution if you're a small agency. But once you've run your campaigns, then produce your automated reports utilizing these same tools for insights, anomalies, recommendations. And we're going to show you the creation of a report using Claude Cowork in a moment. Okay, analytics and measurements. I think what I love about this is that AI makes analysis accessible across teams. It's no longer, just a few individuals that might reside in an insights department or the data department or the strategy department, particularly for small, medium-sized agencies. Analysis, really can be taken up a step. And it's thanks to these natural language capabilities of the LLMs that can, really make great storytelling out of the data and assist people get to, faster insight generation. You look at the insights, challenge them. I mean, does it all make sense? That's your role. Your judgment, your human judgment is still absolutely critical. But these tools are powerful. They can detect anomalies. They can suggest responsive scenario planning, and they really can help you produce much higher quality reports much quicker. And reporting, depending on where your business resides and what its service offering is. But, I think it's safe to say that reporting tends to be underinvested in historically. It's not normally something that, procurement enjoys allocating budget to as a line item. Surely it's just covered all of that. But now, the quality of the reporting really can be a lot faster, a lot deeper and richer and cost no more. So in this instance, the workflow, we're suggesting configure a Claude workspace for analytics and reporting. You can put in all your campaign data, benchmarks, objectives, ask it to identify the performance drivers, the valuable segments, the channel contributions, any anomalies, and instruct it to turn that data into insights, trends through a clear narrative with recommendations for optimization, and tell it to produce your slide-ready output. Whatever that looks like for you. You can, embed in these tools a look and feel of a presentation, and it will produce an artifact. It's its best endeavor to recreate that same look and feel. And with Claude Design, it's actually surprisingly good. And there are a number of tools that are relevant to this workflow. I won't go through all of them, but I will share this deck. Okay, and then lastly, operations. Now, operations within an AI-powered agency, it's a very broad category, right? It relates to account management, traffic, talent management, project management. And so there are many workflows here to choose from. This is an area where there's also easy wins. I would encourage that, after this presentation, when you're thinking about where to start looking for opportunities to, apply some of this, in your ops is where the low hanging fruit really resides. So, briefs, there really should be no such thing as a bad brief anymore. The briefing template can be created. It can be enriched through going backwards and forth with the system itself. That should be hold all of the institutional knowledge around a brand, all of the digital assets associated with that brand, previous campaigns, etc. So briefs should be more robust. Timesheets should be more accurate. Knowledge management is such a critical one. And that's what I've decided to do today's workflow on. But really, this is where AI saves agencies many hours, and ROI is self-evident and defendable. So I love the idea of knowledge management because I'm hopeful that after today's presentation, you're all going to look and identify a few workflows within your business that could be AI augmented, and you go into a mindset of experimentation. You map out a workflow, and you're going to test out these different tools and measure, can you get to a better output, and what does it take in terms of time and cost. Now, you don't want to lose those learnings. And as you evolve your agency's AI literacy, it's important that you simultaneously develop a repository where that knowledge resides. So there's a number of different tools that can be utilized for this. I'm going to be proposing that you use Notion with its AI layer. So you would set up Notion and define the structure and system of it, and you can upload briefs, decks, research, reports, case studies, guidelines per client, and you structure it so that it's highly searchable. It is AI powered. It's at a DNA level. I think they integrated ChatGPT, if I'm not mistaken, right from the outset. So it just makes everything searchable and queryable via AI. So things that it could contain, your prompt library. You don't want to re-engineer prompts that have successfully, produced campaign territory in the past for a brand or a look and feel. So you want to store all of that. Once you've cracked the workflow, and you want it to be adopted, there must be a resource that your staff can go to and say, I'm about to write a creative brief. Where's the template? What is the process that I follow in order to use this document? So that's your starting point for your briefs, your strategies, your proposals, and you continuously feed in new work and learnings into it so that you essentially are producing a repository that is holding your institutional knowledge that you've gained through this journey of improving your workflows. Okay, so what you've been exposed to now is a workflow associated with each layer of service delivery within an agency. But the question really is, where are you at in terms of the maturity model of adoption to become an AI-powered agency? What are the behaviors associated with the different stages? And what do I need to do next in order to move forward? So the first stage of the maturity model, we've described it as curious. We often encounter agencies where there is someone in the studio who uses Midjourney. They the go-to person, they understand the tool, they get some consistency out of their creative outputs, but there's no shared learning with the rest of the team. There's no policy in place on which tools to use, there's just no real measurement of the impact of it. And most independent agencies and small network groupings sit in this first phase of the maturity model. The second is sanctioned. So here, tools are officially licensed. Agencies are offering some staff training. There may be a usage policy published, and there may be one or two flagship case studies that the business can point to. And this is where many of the sort of mid-sized agencies are now in 2026. And the big leap really is between step 2 life stage 2 and 3. And this is where AI is workflow integrated. So it's built into one or two of your core workflows. Social media, for example, how do we use AI, which tools for strategy, for the content planning, for the creative development, for the publishing, the scheduling, publishing, and reporting. It's an entire workflow, and the steps associated with it and the AI powering those steps is clearly understood by the full team. And we have standard operating procedures supporting those, and and it's been determined what the lift is, why it matters to actually run that department in that particular way. Examples may also be in creative production, like asset versioning. We get our television, the very next step, this is what we do with it. And we have our social media cut downs. We have, these versions, those versions, extract audio, potentially use it for, this purpose or that purpose, or, take the images and let's get the aspect ratios right so they're redeployed to web, etc. And it's really, it's measured as a throughput. The quality is clear and it's measurable, and how one operates around this is really the defining characteristic of this stage. From our research, it's estimated that only the leading top 20% of agencies within major holding companies have made this leap, but of course some ambitious indies as well. All right, so the next one is the sort of AI native organization. It's in this business, the organizational chart has been redesigned around human plus AI teams. Pricing has been adapted to mirror the fact that the business is now AI-led, perhaps to outcomes and not hours. And there are internal agent platforms, and AI literacy is obviously prevalent throughout the business, but it's also a hiring requirement. So when talent is reviewed, they're mapped against their suitability to operate within an AI native company. And this is an ambition that certainly we've seen very few actually achieve. And then ultimately, the fifth stage of the maturity model, what is in hot pursuit is these compounding benefits of competitive advantage through these AI technologies. So in this instance, your AI capabilities and your proprietary data really create durable advantage. And you're seeing, an agency in this space is using its own data, its own agent stack to do things that competitors structurally cannot. And obviously that is a business that has a very distinct organizational chart that has been redesigned around these tools, and presumably capable of disproportionate outputs relative to its human resource. Okay, so a little diagnostic check for you is to just think about a workflow in your business. Maybe you still need to map that workflow out. Frequently, there's a process, but it's a little bit fluid. Get the team to sit down, map it out, and see, can we measure, the implications of AI making us faster, better, cheaper. The list goes on this quarter, not anecdotally, but with a number. And that's really the gap between stage 2 and stage 3. All right, we're getting closer to the practical demos. For a little bit of context, we've decided to follow a typical campaign workflow. So you'll recognize this: research, moving into strategy, moving into creative production. Your campaign goes live, and then finally there is a report to be produced for clients. So for the purpose of these demos, we created a fictional brief. We actually did create the brief, and we used it to build a custom GPT for research and a separate GPT for strategy, which produced some insights against which Ross is going to execute some creative. So I'm going to take you through these so that they are pre-recorded, so that we just didn't want to be typing up prompts and all of the rest during a live demo. But we're going to take you on a journey now so that you can actually see custom GPTs being made for different purposes, and then we're going to move into creative. I do want to just state a caveat. So, we're not an agency, and we're not seeking to win a Cannes Lion here. We just want to show you, what's possible with these tools and how they can be used at these different stages of a campaign process. So it's less about the things that we're making and more about showing you, building out these custom purpose-based GPTs and mapping them against the different phases of a campaign rollout. Okay, so the first one I want to show you is just creating a custom GPT. Apologies for those who are familiar with this. It's going to be a very short video, but the reason why we do this is because ChatGPT is a general purpose AI, and by making it a custom GPT, we turn it into a specialized system that does a very specific job, does it properly every single time. So it removes the variability. This allows you to lock in expertise, whether it's your strategy, your frameworks, tone, processes. It can standardize the outputs so that everyone gets a consistent level of quality or a consistent document, however you like your company to present its thinking. It can save you time by automating repeatable thinking, not just tasks, and it really can scale capability. So junior teams can produce senior level work a hell of a lot faster. Okay.
Here's a quick walkthrough on how to build a custom GPT, one that helps you go beyond quick answers and actually think through information. Start by opening ChatGPT. On the left sidebar, click More, GPTs, then click Create. In the Create tab, describe what you want in plain English. This gives you a strong starting point. You can fully create the GPT here. It will guide you through instructions, naming, and even generating a thumbnail. To save time, we've gone ahead and made custom instructions we'll paste here, or move to the Configure tab. This is essentially the same as the previous tab, but laid out in a more structured way. If you've described what you want in the Conversation tab, ChatGPT will automatically update details here. Add a clear name and description, then focus on the instructions. This is the core of how it behaves. Be specific about what you expect. Define clearly its goal, how it should react, tone of voice, and what it should avoid. If needed, you can upload PDFs, notes, or internal documents. This helps your GPT work with specific sources or frameworks. If you don't need that, you can skip it. You can also enable tools like web browsing or code interpreter. Only turn these on if they support your goal. Keeping things focused usually leads to better results. Now test your GPT. Ask real research questions. Try messy or incomplete inputs. Pay attention to where the responses feel vague or too confident. Then go back and refine your instructions. Once you're happy with it and you've named the GPT, click Create. You can keep it private, share it with a link, or publish it more broadly. Most custom GPTs fall short because the instructions are too vague. The more clearly you define how it should think and respond, the more useful it becomes.
Okay, so in this next demo, we're going to be creating our research demo. We ultimately are seeking to answer a brief. The brief that we created for ourselves was to, very simple one, launch a product, a laptop bag for a digital first campaign on a global basis. And so in order to do that, we needed to create a GPT that would do a category scan, and we've asked it to review, to kind of look at competitor websites, look at claims, look at reviews, social comments. We're trying to see, are there kind of any emotional themes, any frustrations, avoid what's perhaps overused, direct us towards really what matters. And so the purpose of this GPT is to create research for us.
In this video, we'll show you how to use a custom GPT made for research. For this example, we're working with a fictional brief. The task is to launch a new laptop bag through a global digital marketing campaign. To support this, we're using a custom GPT built specifically for research. The value lies in how we've set it up. It's designed to take scattered information and turn it into structured insight. Instead of long, messy outputs, it organizes everything into clear sections like audience themes, tensions, emotional patterns, and competitor messaging. Let's see what that looks like in practice. We prompt it to analyze the laptop bag category and surface insights that could inform a marketing approach. Within seconds, it returns a structured breakdown. It starts by mapping the category. You immediately see what customers expect as standard, things like protection, organization, and portability. Then it surfaces tensions. For example, the trade-off between protection and bulk, or the gap between clean design and real functionality, or the need for one versatile bag that works across multiple contexts. These are the kinds of insights that are easy to miss when you're scanning through raw data. It also layers in the emotional side. You can see where customers feel uncertain, where they feel reassured, and where frustration starts to build over time. On the competitive side, it scans for repeated language and patterns. You quickly see that most brands are saying the same things: lightweight, durable, water-resistant, well-organized, which tells you the category is crowded with similar messaging. Finally, it pulls everything together into a set of clear signals. So instead of reading through pages of notes, you get a distilled view of how the category behaves. For an agency, this gives a strong foundation to work with. It helps teams align faster. It makes insights easier to share. And it gives you a more grounded base before moving into strategy or creative. Don't allow it to do the thinking for you, but use its work to enhance workflow.
Okay, moving forward, we've produced some category insights there. We've got our research. We have now built our custom GPT for strategic positioning, and we are going to be uploading all of our research into it to look for some strategic comms messaging territories that could be valuable to us.
In this demonstration, we'll be showing you how you can build further on the research you've done and utilize ChatGPT for strategy. For this project, we created a custom GPT specifically for strategy. The idea was to take structured research and turn it into something a team can actually use. So we defined its role very tightly. It acts like a strategy director. It looks at research, interprets it, and makes calls. It doesn't repeat insights, and it avoids sitting in the middle. It's designed to be opinionated and decisive. Now let's see what happens when we give it the research from our previous step. We prompt it to develop a campaign strategy for the laptop bag launch. Here's what it comes back with. First, it reframes the category. It makes it clear that most features are expected. Protection, durability, organization, these are baseline. What actually matters are the trade-offs people are making. Do I choose something slim or something that feels more protective? Do I prioritize clean design or practical storage? Can one bag really work across different parts of my day? That shift helps focus the strategy on real decisions, not just product features. Next, it highlights what's missing. It points out that most brands make similar promises, but don't really prove them. They talk about versatility, but don't reflect how people actually move through their day. And they stay at a functional level without connecting to how people want to feel. Finally, it suggests starting points for campaigns. Things like showing what happens when a product fails, or testing it in real-life conditions. For a team, this is where it becomes valuable. This creates a stronger starting point for creative work. It's not doing the thinking for you, but it helps you get to better thinking with a lot more clarity and speed.
Okay. All right, guys. So We are going to give a little bit of a live demo now at this stage. We've got our strategy, we've got some insights, we're going to do some mock creative development against that. And in order to pull this off, we're going to be utilizing a tool called Weavy. We touched in the fluency section on multimodal tools. Weavy is a multimodal tool. It really allows us to pull in various different AI models into a singular interface that we can work in to produce some creative assets. So I'm going to hand over to Ross now, who will take us through Weavy.
Awesome, thanks, Dave. Cool. So what you're looking at now is an application, as Dave mentioned, called Weavy. In my opinion, this is the sort of pinnacle of AI content production. It is a node, what is referred to as a node-based interface. I'm not going to get into the technical details of how this works. We do touch on this in some of our courses, but for the most part, all you really need to understand what does look like a very intimidating, at first glance interface is actually quite straightforward once you break it down. But for the purpose of this, I'm just going to show you basically how we went about taking the insights and the research that was developed by our custom GPTs using our laptop bag, which is over here. This is the image of that. Two things I want to show you here is the scalability of an application like this, how everything links together, and how easy it is to iterate over, whether you want to create different colors of a bag in this case, different aspect ratios for social media content, website content, banner ad content, etc. Okay, so here we have our bag. Each of these essentially is a node. Each node performs a different function. This is an image node, and this is a text box node. You can essentially see this as a prompt box, which is now feeding the prompt into here. So here we've developed our bag there, and then it's connected via other sort of functional and utility nodes. Over here, I've got a section that just basically allows us to separate out different colors. So here we have black, navy blue, gray, olive green, and burgundy. So just simply by plugging in the original image of the bag, and we want a black version, obviously we have the blue version, gray version, olive green, and our burgundy. Great. So now looking at something like this, you think, okay, well, let's say, for example, the client comes back and says, oh, you've created all these images of the bags, and the designer now needs to put a logo onto it. They're like, oh, sorry, we forgot that the logo wasn't added. So it's a simple case of swapping out the bag. So here we have our ZenRobot logo, which we placed positioned onto the bag exactly where it's been specified by our client. Great. And it's a simple case of just rerunning these nodes connected to the new bag, which is the new sort of input module, and the logos then get placed onto there. Now, I mean, that's just a quick example, but you can think about the scalability of this. If you had to produce this bag as a product shot in different studio environments, in different lifestyle environments. And what we've done here is we've taken the bag and now plugged it into different situations based on the research that was found from our custom GPT. Again, not going to get into the technical details of these sort of prompt boxes. These I was assisted by ChatGPT to help me write these prompts. But for the most part, what we're trying to create here is an interface that allows us to swap out. In this case, we've got the ethnicity of the character carrying the bag and the place based on the versatility of what we want this bag to have. Here we have a bus stop, train station, or train platform, city street, etc. So simply by swapping these values out and then rerunning the prompts, we've got different scenarios. So again, we've got a shot of a person sitting in a sort of a hotel lobby. Over here, this person in a coffee shop, this person at what looks like a shopping mall, and a coffee shop again. So again, just the sort of scalability and the how versatile it is in terms of just swapping certain characters and values out becomes very it's way faster and less time consuming, but also from a design perspective and an iterative creative perspective helps you come up with really cool ideas. So here we've got cool. So here's this person obviously showing the bag at the gym, hotel lobby, again in the gym, just swapping the character out there. Here, similar, we've still got the black bag, again, in different scenarios. Then kind of dialing down into a slightly different, so we've taken the blue bag in this case. here is a zoomed in shot, looking at the water resistant element of it. So this is just, show me this bag as a water resistant bag with some just different styles of shots in there. That's essentially a storyboard shot of what the bag could look like. They're looking at the sort of compartments inside the bag, that we've got that type of shot. Again, now just simply by plugging in a different color bag, you could swap this out for whichever. Again, looking at the water resistance, some slightly more conceptual, potentially ad or banner ad style images that could work here. Again, showing versatility of the bag, the top-down shot of the green bag, and then the sort of on the go or moving through lifestyle shots, which for some categories would sort of resonate a bit better. And now, looking at all of this, we've got all of our images. These become the start frames, or could become the start frames for potential ads, potential banner ads, something for a website, or just clips that can be stitched together in order to create a full video. So here's just an example of that. Again, you just got to think of this as, not having to go out and shoot the bag, but we've got this here, which was based off of this image over here. Let's go, we have another one over here. Is with our ZenRobot logo. Different aspect ratio and showing based on one of the images that we've pulled from here. And then a slightly more, this is a sort of trending style of video generation at the moment. This is a single image with multiple frames. So we've got, a person going through their day using the bag, all 9 frames in one image plugged into a video model. This is Seed Dance, and it stitches it together. The prompt is quite elaborate, but just an idea of what is possible with using the right tools and the prompts that could produce something like this. So there we go. That is like a very quick run through of the possibilities of something like this. Personally, I use this tool on a regular basis for both teaching as well as content production. There are quite a few node-based applications and multimodal tools that are coming out, but for the most part, they all do pretty much the same thing. Weavy is quite a technical version, but yeah, this is essentially just what these tools are capable of. Thanks, Dave.
Cool, thanks, Ross. All right, guys, we're moving towards wrapping up. Let me just bring you back here. Okay, what we want to just show you now is using Claude Cowork as agentic processing to produce a report. So as mentioned earlier, think about agentic really as just it's a multi-step workflow which is largely automated, autonomous, and it's a system that has the capability to resolve multiple steps en route to concluding a goal. So the goal is produce a report, and in order to do that, it needs to look at some data, crunch that data, interpret it, produce a report, brand that report, and so forth. So let's take a look at Claude Cowork do its thing.
We are now going to walk through an agentic demonstration of how to use Claude Cowork to help you craft a report. First, what we're going to do is head over to the folder where all of our assets are stored. In here, we have a collection of images, along with key elements such as brand messaging and tone, competitor insights, performance data, and detailed product specifications. This is the folder we'll be exploring as we prompt Claude to analyze the contents and generate a report for us. Now, back in Claude, we are now going to instruct it to search within the project. We select the project here, Carry Your World, which is now selected. I will now provide a prompt, and Claude will carry out the actions based on that instruction. Claude Cowork is now generating the report. It's providing us with a structured breakdown of what we can expect to find in the presentation file. This can take anything from a few minutes to an hour, depending on the amount of content the agent needs to work through. We open the presentation file in the browser, and here we have a complete campaign report, clearly organized by performance, platforms, assets, and creative output. As you can see, it has drawn inspiration directly from the images and materials we provided in the folder. Now think about what just happened. 5 documents, 20+ images, a full campaign debrief, written, structured, and ready to present. For a strategist, that's a morning's work. For an account manager, pulling this together at the end of a campaign cycle, that's half a day they're not getting back. Cowork doesn't replace the thinking, but it eliminates the grind, the digging through files, the reformatting, the first draft no one wants to write. That time goes back to your team, back to the work that actually needs a human.
Okay. How are we doing for time? We do want to conclude by sharing a few next steps, practical next steps for you. So I'm going to just jump straight to that. I think, the section that I'm going to whiz past in order to get there is just kind of some of the hard truths that exist, and are uncomfortable. Some of the changes, I think, a lot of people are worried about kind of talent disruption, and I believe rightly so. Agency leaders are having to figure out how to negotiate new commercial models, moving away from time and materials based costings to outputs, and what that looks like, how to protect brand safety. If you've got AI producing thousands of assets, your error rate that could be small becomes problematic. So there is a lot there, and if there's time, we can get to it. But I think it's going to be more valuable to just kind of close out by just sharing some top line thoughts of what you might do as a leader as a next step. I'd originally done this by role. So if I was a CEO, this is how I would view it. A COO, this is how I would view it. ECD, strategist, etc. But I didn't think it was fair to hit everyone here with another 10 or 15 slides. So I've looked for themes, and I've just trying to kind of put these together, and I think that every department could benefit from the following steps. We also are happy to facilitate another session such as this at some point in the future. We'll chat to the ACA about that. Perhaps you can all share your feedback with the ACA, and just advise what you liked, what you didn't like, and what might be useful to you. We would be happy to help. Okay, so what could you do come Monday? I think everything is built from here on out on AI literacy. So there needs to be a baseline of understanding within your organization. However you choose to do that, you may have resources that exist within your business as part of a major ad network. You may be, identifying one individual who's going to lead transformation within your business as a small or medium-sized agency. But I think it's important to set a baseline, and that every employee that exists in your company should have a foundational understanding of AI, and I would encourage that is measured and linked to performance reviews. So what does the floor look like in terms of that knowledge, that understanding for the agency to be able to have one conversation which everyone kind of understands, what we're talking about and what the advantages of it are. I would encourage that, there's a culture of experimentation, but you do need to commit to a model stack of some sort for the agency. You need to enable your staff. There are costs that come with these various tools, but in the grand scheme of the value that you can get out of your people, how much deeper and more robust and professional their engagements will be with your staff in written communications and in verbal interactions, just in terms of the understanding of category and competitors and all of that. I mean, in the old days, you acquired this knowledge slowly by working on the accounts and working your way up on the accounts, and after a year or so, you had like a good understanding of the operating space. But in this day and age, that's not acceptable. You need to get up to speed and get up to speed fast. And so I would say, look at the models which are most relevant to the different workflows, and then make some commitments. You can always change them, but you cannot change the models every time there's a new thing that comes out as well. So, define which models are going to be used for which workflows and which stages, and have them accessible to your talent within the business. So I said initiate a culture of experimenting with AI. I mean, you can bring in consultants or a ZenRobot or to assist with this, but I think a lot can be done independently as well, which is just be playful with AI, experiment with it. What I would suggest to CEOs is to instruct the leadership team to pick one workflow per agency discipline, and rebuild it using AI. So what does strategy look like? What does research look like? What does creative iterations look like on a particular campaign using AI, and measure that baseline and that throughput, so that you've got the cost benefit proof. But importantly, to the next point, is start to think about how do you retain that knowledge. Staff retention is a challenge within most agencies. Now, you can't be investing in all of this knowledge, and and people, it leaves with people. So think about like your repository, your central repository, where you can keep all of the learnings, the prompts, the reusable modules, code that might have been built, and links to GPTs that have been created in one really structured, accessible place. To CEOs and COOs, and MDs, CFOs, start to rethink the commercial models. It's not all going to necessarily happen in just kind of, one foul swoop. What I would suggest is remodel one client's engagement away from ours. Just take one service delivery and test outcome-based or productized retainers, so that you can learn and iterate. It may be something like, fixed fees for social cut downs. And then it's incumbent upon you to look at which of the AI tools can assist you to get that work done in the most, efficient way possible. There's a number of commercial models that have been identified, and they can all be experimented with. Is a client subscribing to your workflow or your capabilities, or per the previous example, is it the outputs? And then, finally, for the leadership, have an organizational roadmap. Don't let AI just be this thing that we keep hearing about, what is the roadmap? How to get the teams aligned on what the vision is for the organization for utilizing AI, where we do, where we don't, what the policies are, what the risks are. And I would signal to clients, it's bundled in with the previous conversation around the commercial modeling, but I would bundle it in and signal to them that the business is is evolving, and clarify to them where you will and won't use it, and have open discussions around kind of any concerns, risks, advantages, benefits, etc. And yeah, so that would be some immediate next steps that I would propose that you could take. And yeah, I don't know if this forum typically suits Q&A, if we want to go there, or Gillian, if you would like to wrap up. But yeah, that's really our shotgun summary on some top line thoughts around the AI powered agency of tomorrow.
Thanks, David, and thanks, Ross. I mean, I think what you've shown is the capability of these things, but you've also shown that there's a lot of human work that needs to go into using the tools to get the best possible output. We can take some questions, but I think I just wanted to focus in on those remuneration conversations, and the fact that you say they like experiment, try different things. Obviously, there's major efficiencies for clients to have an agency work with these kind of tools. So they'll be looking to reduce fees because things are being done faster. But these tools are taking a lot of time and investment by agencies to develop, and there's costs attached as well. So how do you have that conversation with a client who's only seeing efficiency output story and not seeing everything that's going into it on the agency side?
Yeah, look, I think every client is going to be different, and I mean, but we're talking about also, procurement, right? So they're looking at it from, quite a one-dimensional perspective, which is cost saving.
Yeah.
If a task takes, previously took 40 hours and now takes 4 hours, I mean, the agency is going to lose 90% of its its revenue on delivering that, which is just not sustainable. I think part of the conversation is, education, because it's not as simple as it appears. It definitely is much more cost effective, and there can certainly be cost savings, but there's major upskilling to take place as well. And so there's training, there's tools, there are costs. So there is a rebuttal, in that. But look, I think the uncomfortable truth is that the single biggest cost for most agencies is people.
Yeah.
They're human resource-based businesses, and the compensation ratio being the percentage of revenue that gets spent on people, I think the holy grail is around 55%. I don't know many, if any, agencies that are attaining that. Most are like, in 65 to 70, 75, and it's very uncomfortable. And so, we do need to use these tools to actually make the businesses more profitable. And that does mean operating more efficiently with less people. Yeah, I mean, I always say, surely the conversation should start with, well, this allows agencies to go home at 5 p.m. and not work on weekends, for starters.
That's also true.
Yeah.
I think Greg's got a question. Greg Fillion.
I also have enabled mics for all attendees for Q&A. So Greg, you may go ahead. You can just unmute and then you may speak.
Greg's gone. Any other questions?
We've got questions in the Q&A. Tyler, I'm not sure if Tyler's still on the line, but Tyler asked, do you think AI has the potential to fill the space between above the line level content and generic digital content, where above the line is generally high budget and digital could be considered a lower budget per execution? Do you think this offers an opportunity for a new product between the two?
Look, I can use a practical example that we're seeing right now for a client who I can't name, but it's one of the world's biggest social media companies. How they are doing it is they still are investing in above the line to crack big emotion storytelling, have artistic control over like all of the different aspects of the visual execution. And then as they go down the funnel, where you've got like all of these different assets to be produced, it's increasingly using AI. So it's not a one or the other, it's a bit of a blend of both. And it's an incredibly powerful way to go about it, because you can do a shoot and you can set up a lot of creative parameters that you actually want, so that they're obviously global. So there's a lot in the art direction that they want to establish in that initial shoot. But you can then use that as a control for rolling out localization to different markets, so that you can change characters based on ethnicity or city, but still kind of retain a lot from the sort of the big art direction decisions that are taken at an above the line level. So yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a technology that I think runs throughout everything. I mean, we're seeing the likes of Ben Affleck, invest in major AI for silver screen level production and post production. That sort of tech is going to apply all the way through. I think the demands of modern marketing and the fragmentation of the media landscape means that work needs to live in so many different places, and it's not really practical to achieve that. And that's why so many people are grinding away after hours, because we're doing these cut downs for social, and we're making images for web, and we've got TikTok and Insta and Snap, and there's just so many different environments, and that's really the promise of these. You don't need your ECDs and your CDs and expensive resource, doing what's essentially going to become factory level work. When the tools can reliably take a core asset class and roll it out, core asset and roll it out against different classes, in an efficient and trusted way, that's huge for this industry.
Yeah, there's one last question. I see at time, but I just want to read it because I think it's interesting. From Byron Rose, do you have any best practices or advice on agentic workflows for credit usage, especially when getting playful with AI for smaller companies, so that the usage credits don't go through the roof for clients?
I don't know about best practices or advice. I mean, Ross, I don't know if you want to. I mean, these tools cost, and I mean, we do encourage our teams to do think about it as an economic transaction, and not just try and randomly prompt their way into the right territory or destination. We try and encourage everyone to be very intentional around how they use the credits. But is Ross still here?
Yeah, he's here.
Yeah, Ross, what's your view on credits for agentic workflows?
Look, I mean, I'm going to use the same, I guess, process that I use or a suggestion I use for a standard AI, which is creating images and videos. It's like, find the tool that works for you and find a tool that's cheaper to test before you go to the big tool that is probably going to get a lot closer to what it is that is going to be the deliverable to the client. That's from that side. I mean, if you want like a proper hack that I use for Claude, this might sound ridiculous, but I love this sort of thing because, well, I love hacks, but for when I am using Claude Code, for example, asking, I saw this come through on a newsletter and I haven't stopped using it since, is asking it to respond as a caveman. Now, that might sound ridiculous. What it does is you say, respond like a caveman, yes and no answers, me work, me build, yes sir, like basics. What that does is it cuts away all the fluff in its
Yes.
response, because a lot of the time the response that comes through is essentially using up credits. If you've used Claude before, particularly Claude Code and Cowork, you have a usage percentage where you only have a certain, if you're on the tier that I'm on, which is not the $100 plus tier, you need to be quite conservative with those credits. So if I know I've only got 4 hours, or I've got a certain percentage that I can work within this time frame, and I watch those hours, I'm like always checking, like how close am I getting to, this is when I get cut off, and I can only start again at 12 o'clock or whatever. That is a very simple hack that is, if you're doing a lot of work and you're getting large responses from the machine, that's a simple way of doing it. But I also think that that illustrates what the future of, it sounds like this, you know, it's like, yeah, make it respond like a caveman. So there's quite a bit of comedy in that, but I think that it speaks to the, you know, just the conservative nature or the conservative approach that you have to have when you start using these tools. Because at the beginning, it's just like, it feels like gambling. You're kind of like, wow, this is amazing. Look at this image, look at this video. Look again, your credits are gone. And you're like, ooh, okay, well, we have to start this again next month, and you're on the 5th of the month. So it's like, that's, and also just picking the tools. For example, like Flora, which is a very similar tool to Weavy, they have just said their whole thing is like, they understand this credits thing, and they know that people are like struggling to like every month, because, you know, at the end of the month, you've got like so many hours or so many credits left, and you end up like hustling to try use them, and then it ticks over again the next month. So what they've done is they carry over your tokens, and they carry over your credits, which I think for all the platforms, that is going to, the reason they become successful is because of that. Everyone else is going to follow suit, and it's a race to the bottom.
Yeah, I think those are some really, really useful tips to be intentional, but also to cut the fluff. Thank you so much, David and Ross. Amazing. There have been lots of thank yous and lots of comments in the chat about how insightful the session was and how useful it was. So yay, well done. And we'll share the deck and the recording with everybody and contact details, and look forward to doing lots more with you guys. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks,
Awesome.
everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thanks.
your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.